Hi, my name is Jordan. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I struggle with anger, anxiety, and control. Welcome back to the Crosstalk Cafe, everyone. Today we are looking at how our identity gets tied to our past failures and how Jesus wants to take our worst labels and turn them into a testimony. But before we get into the Word of God, Chris, I was thinking about how so many of us spend years trying to quiet our stress, but we're still fueling our minds first thing in the morning with high-octane caffeine. That's why I'm so glad to welcome our brand partner, Savorista Coffee.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I struggle with anxiety, shame, and OCD. Oh, absolutely, Jordan. Savorista hits right at the heart of the recovery lifestyle. Their founder, Kate Brown, created craft decaf and half-calf coffee out of her own story of realizing caffeine was just amplifying her stress. Her whole focus is built on less hustle and more intention. Our listeners can go to savorista.com and enter the promo code PCBC to get 25% off.
It really helps you pause and savor life instead of constantly running on high alert overdrive. And speaking of creating a calm space for mind and body, another major area where we need rest is getting actual restorative sleep. That's why we're also so grateful to welcome Cozy Earth to the cafe today.
Yes, Cozy Earth completely redefines sleep comfort with their bedding and pajamas made from premium viscose from bamboo, which naturally wicks moisture to keep hot sleepers cool and dry all night long. Thousands of five-star customer reviews call these sheets buttery soft, and they back everything with a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty. Our listeners can head over to CozyEarth.com and use that exact same promo code PCBC to get an exclusive 21% off any product.
That is an incredible deal. And because we earn a commission when you use our code PCBC at checkout for either of these brands, you're directly supporting the show and the ministry here at the cafe. But now, Chris, let's step completely out of commercial mode. When you read the story of the man with leprosy in the book of Mark, you realize the man doesn't even have a name. His disease had literally become his entire identity. And that is exactly what we do to ourselves in recovery.
Right. I mean, just imagine waking up tomorrow and a doctor tells you that you have this condition.
Oh, man.
And because of that condition, your name is just gone.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
your job is gone. You can never hug your children again.
Yeah.
You are immediately exiled out into the woods outside of your town. And if anyone even approaches you, you have to cover your face and literally scream that you are contaminated.
It sounds like some sort of dystopian movie.
It really does. But that was the actual daily agonizing reality for this anonymous man we see in Mark chapter 1.
It's just terrifying to even think about because, we read these accounts today and I think we just kind of gloss over the word leprosy like, oh, he had a bad rash.
Right. Just a skin issue.
Exactly. But in the first century Jewish culture, contracting this disease was it was effectively a social death sentence. It erased everything about who you were.
Absolutely everything.
You were no longer the village carpenter. You were a father, a husband, or a neighbor anymore. You were just reduced down to a single devastating label. You literally became the disease.
And the mental toll of that is just,
Yeah.
it's huge, right? Because the religious laws of the day, they required total isolation. If you had this, you had to tear your clothes, let your hair hang loose, cover the lower part of your face, and cry out, unclean, unclean, whenever someone came near you.
So humiliating.
It was this mandatory public shaming. And I mean, it was designed to protect the community, sure, but it completely destroyed the individual. Your entire existence was defined by what was wrong with you.
I really want you to just sit with that for a second. Like, think about your own life. Obviously, we aren't dealing with a first century skin disease. But consider how easily a personal struggle or, a failure or a really deeply ingrained habit becomes the only lens through which the world sees you.
Oh, for sure.
It's kind of like, think about how a single drop of dark concentrated dye can fall into a whole gallon of pure water.
That is a perfect way to look at it, actually.
It really is, right? Because it doesn't matter how clear that water was yesterday.
Yeah.
Once that one single drop of dark dye hits, it just, it permeates every single molecule.
It takes over everything.
Exactly. The whole gallon is tinted. And that is exactly what a destructive habit or an untreated hurt does to our identity. Every relationship you have, every job interview you walk into, every quiet moment you spend alone in your living room, it all gets tinted by that dark dye.
Yeah. You stop being a person who struggles with something, and you just become the struggle itself. The label just entirely consumes you.
Which I think makes the actions of the man in Mark chapter 1 so incredibly brave.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he is completely defined by this dark dye. He has been exiled. And yet, he does the unthinkable right. He approaches Jesus.
He does. We're told he came to him, fell to his knees, and begged.
Wait, let's pause right there because we really can't miss the risk he is taking here.
Oh, it was a massive risk.
Right. He is legally forbidden to be anywhere near a crowd, let alone walking right up to a prominent rabbi. I mean, if people saw him coming, they would have literally thrown stones at him to keep him away. The desperation here is just intense.
It is absolute desperation. But, it's also this beautiful picture of what real surrender looks like. He pushes past the social boundaries. He ignores the stones that might be thrown. He pushes past the shame of his label, and he just falls to his knees.
Yeah.
And listen to what he says. He doesn't complain about the unfairness of his life. He doesn't demand a cure. He just says, if you are willing, you can make me clean.
That phrasing is everything. If you are willing. He acknowledges the sovereign power of Jesus, and he just throws himself entirely on his mercy. He's essentially saying, I know you have the power to pull this dark dye out of the water. The only question is, if you want to.
And the response from Jesus changes human history. Mark tells us that Jesus was indignant.
Which is a strong word.
Very strong. Now, some translations say he was filled with compassion, and both are actually true based on the original language. It's this beautiful, complex mixture of deep, gut-wrenching sorrow for the man's suffering and a righteous, fierce anger at the disease itself.
Wow.
Jesus is furious at what this condition has stolen from the man. And then Jesus does something that probably made the entire crowd just gasp in horror.
He touched him.
He reached out his hand and made physical contact with a man who was considered completely untouchable.
Think about the sensory shock of that moment for the man.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
Right. This is a guy who hasn't felt the warmth of a human hand in years. Nobody bumps into him at the market. Nobody shakes his hand. Nobody hugs him. He lives in a world of constant physical recoiling.
Yeah, everyone just backing away.
Exactly. And Jesus, instead of backing away, instead of just, speaking a word of healing from a safe 6-foot distance, he steps right into the contamination zone. He reaches right through the label, right through the dark dye, and actually touches his skin.
And under the laws of that era, touching someone with this disease would make the person who touched them ceremonially defiled. Like, contamination was supposed to transfer to Jesus.
Right.
But instead, the purity of Jesus transfers to the man. Jesus says, I am willing, be clean, and immediately the disease left him.
Immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Just let that sink in for a second. The physical torment, the visible lesions, the cause of his absolute isolation, it all just vanished in a split second. The dark dye is instantly pulled out of the water.
The water is crystal clear again?
Yes. It is a stunning, instantaneous miracle. But, this immediate shift introduces a massive tension in the narrative. And it's a tension that is incredibly relevant for anyone walking through a recovery journey today.
Oh, for sure.
Because sometimes deliverance from a stronghold comes just as quickly. You surrender entirely, you fall on your knees, and God miraculously, instantly removes the craving or the desire for that destructive habit.
Yeah, we see it happen. I mean, I've heard people share stories where they brought a lifelong addiction to the altar, surrendered it, and the physical craving literally just evaporated that day.
God is fully capable of instantaneous deliverance. But here is the tension, and this is where I need to play devil's advocate for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Because if I am that man, and I have just been instantly healed by the Son of God, I am running straight home. I am kissing my wife, I am hugging my kids, and I am throwing a neighborhood block party.
Right. Like the nightmare is over.
Exactly. But Jesus doesn't let him do that.
No, he doesn't. Mark chapter 1, verse 43 says, Jesus sent him away at once with a strong warning.
Right. He gives him chores. He says, see that you don't tell this to anyone. But go, show yourself to the priest, and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing. And I have to be honest, if I read this from a purely human perspective, it sounds incredibly bureaucratic. Jesus is the Son of God. He just healed an incurable disease with a physical touch. Why in the world is he handing this guy a permission slip and telling him to go stand in line at the local health department?
It does seem crazy, doesn't it?
It really does. Like, why force him to jump through the rigorous red tape hoops of a legal system?
Well, it's such a valid frustration, and honestly, it's exactly how a lot of people feel when they experience a breakthrough, but then realize they still have to do the daily work of recovery.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But to understand why Jesus did this, we have to look at the civic structures of the time. Jesus was a Jewish man living completely within the boundaries of the Mosaic law. The new covenant hadn't been established yet. And under that law, neither Jesus nor the man had the civic authority to declare the label of unclean officially removed.
Okay, so the priests were essentially the public health officials. They were like the CDC of the first century.
Exactly. They were the only ones who possessed the legal and religious authority to restore a person's social standing. So labeling his problem in the beginning was easy. Obtaining the miraculous cleansing from Christ was immediate. But being officially restored to his community, actually changing how society viewed him and how he viewed himself, that required a process.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So the miracle is the intervention,
Mm.
but the process is how the new identity actually takes root in reality.
Right.
Because if he just runs home, his neighbors are going to scream and run away from him because he hasn't been officially cleared. He has the miracle, but he doesn't have the testimony yet.
Exactly. And that is why Jesus specifically commands him to offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded. He is pointing the man directly to a highly specific multi-day process outlined in Leviticus chapter 14.
And we really need to look at what that process involves because it is not just a quick doctor's visit.
No, not at all.
It is intensely detailed, highly symbolic, and requires immense discipline.
Let's walk through it because it's just fascinating. Leviticus 14 starts by saying that the priest has to go outside the camp to examine the person.
I love that detail so much.
Right. The man is not allowed to just walk into the temple and say, hey, look, I'm better. God's representative has to leave the holy, comfortable center of the community and go out to the margins, out to the lonely place where the man is isolated.
It just shows that God meets us exactly where we are, right in the middle of our mess.
Exactly. So once the priest goes out there and confirms that the disease is actually healed, the rigorous steps begin. Verses 4 through 7 describe the first phase, which involves bringing 2 live, clean birds, some cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop.
Okay, stop right there, because if we just read that list, it sounds completely random, like birds, wood, yarn, and a plant.
A very weird shopping list.
Right, but there is profound symbolism here, right? Like, why these specific items?
Oh, every single item points to the nature of what is happening. The cedar wood, for instance, is highly resistant to rot and decay. In ancient times, it was a symbol of endurance and incorruptibility.
Wow.
So you are bringing this wood that resists decay to a man whose flesh was literally rotting away. It is a symbol of new, enduring life.
That is incredible. And what about the scarlet yarn?
Scarlet is the color of blood, which in the biblical mindset represents vitality and life force. And then you have the hyssop. Hyssop is this bushy plant that acts almost like a natural paintbrush or sponge. It absorbs liquid perfectly. It was the exact same plant the Israelites used during the Passover to brush the blood of the lamb on their doorposts.
Right, right.
So it's an instrument of application, a way of taking the cleansing power and applying it directly to the person.
So you have incorruptibility, vitality, and the application of freedom. And then we get to the actual ritual with the birds, which is, honestly, it's intensely visceral. The priest orders one of the birds to be killed over fresh water in a clay pot.
And the original Hebrew there implies running water or living water. It isn't stagnant.
Right, living water in an earthly clay pot. Then the priest takes the live bird, along with the cedar, the yarn, and the hyssop, and he dips all of it into the blood of the sacrificed bird that is mixed with the living water.
Yeah.
He sprinkles the man 7 times, pronounces him clean, and then releases the live bird to fly away into the open fields.
I mean, put yourself in the shoes of the man watching this.
Oh, man.
You have been trapped in the cage of this disease for years. You are sprinkled with this mixture of blood and living water, this physical sensation that wakes up your skin. You hear the authority figure officially declare the word clean over you. And then you watch a bird stained with the same blood that was just sprinkled on you take flight and soar into the open sky.
Wow.
It is a visual breathing metaphor for what just happened to your soul. The disease is dead, and you are free to fly.
It is just a stunning visual. The psychological release of watching that bird fly away must have been overwhelming. But, and this is where the rigorous nature of the process really hits, he still isn't allowed to just go home. The bird flies away, but the man has more work to do.
A lot more work.
Yeah. Verses 8 and 9 outline the physical shedding of the old life. He has to wash his clothes, bathe with water, and shave off all his hair. And, I have to push back here again. Shaving, okay, maybe a haircut. But the text says he has to shave off every single hair on his body. Head, beard, eyebrows, everything.
Oh.
That sounds so extreme. Why such absolute public exposure?
It is extreme, but it's necessary for a complete reset. Think about what hair represents, especially in that culture. A beard was a symbol of dignity. Hair can be a defense mechanism. It's how we present ourselves to the world. It's a way we hide.
Right.
This requirement forces the man to strip away every single hiding place. He cannot hide behind his old appearance. He is being reduced to a completely exposed state, almost like a newborn baby.
That makes so much sense when you relate it to the vulnerability of early recovery.
Yeah.
When you finally decide to get clean, physically or emotionally, you have to shave off all the old defenses. You can't rely on your old coping mechanisms. You can't charm your way out of it. You stand completely bare, totally transparent before the community. You're saying, this is exactly who I am without any masks.
And he has to stand in that vulnerability for a full 7 days. The law says he can enter the camp, but he has to stay outside his own tent for a week.
That is the most agonizing part of this entire process to me.
I know.
You are finally allowed back inside the city limits. You can literally see your house. You can probably smell whatever your family is cooking for dinner.
Yeah.
But you are commanded to sleep outside on the dirt for 7 more days. The impatience would drive me insane. I would be screaming, I'm clean, I have the certificate, let me sleep in my bed.
Yeah.
Why force him to wait?
Because the transition requires discipline. It would be so incredibly tempting to just rush back into normal life, to run into the tent, sit in your favorite chair, and pretend the last few years of exile never happened.
Yeah, just skip the hard part.
Exactly. But God's process forces a pause. It forces the man to sit in the discomfort of this new, vulnerable reality. It builds the internal discipline he is going to need to maintain his new identity.
It's like a spiritual decompression chamber. You can't just go from the depths of the ocean straight to the surface without getting the bends. You have to acclimate to the pressure of regular life again.
Exactly. And that decompression period culminates on the 8th day. The man has to shave everything a second time, wash again, and then bring specific sacrifices to the priest. 2 male lambs, 1 ewe lamb, flour mixed with olive oil, and a log of oil.
Which, I mean, that is a very expensive grocery list for a guy who hasn't been able to work a job in years.
Oh, it's a huge burden.
But this is where the profound grace of the Levitical law shines through. Verse 21 makes a specific provision. It says, if, however, they are poor and cannot afford these, they must take 1 male lamb and 2 doves or 2 young pigeons.
I love that so much.
Right. God ensures that this process of restoration is accessible to everyone, regardless of their financial ruin. When our struggles bankrupt us, and they almost always do, God scales the requirement so that the poorest, most depleted person can still be fully restored.
It is such a comfort. So the priest takes these offerings to the entrance of the tent of meeting, and we reach the climax of the ritual. The priest slaughters the guilt offering, and he takes some of the blood and places it on the lobe of the right ear of the man, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot.
This is so specific. Why the ear, the thumb, and the big toe? And why the right side?
Well, in ancient Near Eastern culture, the right side represented the side of strength, power, and primary action. By placing the blood on these specific points, the priest is consecrating the entirety of the man's active life.
Right.
The right ear represents what he listens to and how he receives truth. The right thumb represents the work of his hands, his daily labor, and how he serves. And the right big toe represents his walk, the direction he chooses to travel, and his moral conduct.
So it is a total head-to-toe coverage. Every single aspect of how he interacts with the world is covered by the blood of the sacrifice.
Exactly, but it doesn't end with the blood. The priest then takes the oil, which is universally recognized in Scripture as a symbol of the Holy Spirit and divine consecration. He sprinkles the oil 7 times before the Lord, and then he places that oil directly on top of the blood, on the right ear, the right thumb, and the right big toe. Finally, he pours the remaining oil over the man's head.
So the oil goes on top of the blood. The cleansing of the sacrifice comes first, and the empowerment of the Spirit seals it.
Yes.
Let's just think about this from the man's perspective again. His body, which used to be covered in rotting sores, which used to be the source of his shame and his exile, is now anointed with holy oil. His ears, his hands, his feet, his very head are reclaimed by God.
It is a total transformation of identity. And when we trace this incredibly meticulous, demanding 8-day process back to the words of Jesus in the Gospel of Mark, everything just clicks into place. Jesus told him to do all of this as a testimony to them.
That is the whole point, right? This wasn't busy work. This wasn't Jesus just being a stickler for the rules. This was about reverse osmosis. If the drop of dark dye was the label of his disease, this 8-day process was the intense filtration system required to pull that dye out of the social consciousness of the community.
By walking through every step, the birds, the shaving, the waiting, the blood, the oil, he is providing undeniable, legal, religious, and public proof that a miracle has occurred. He walks into the temple as an anonymous sufferer, and he walks out as a living testimony.
And this is exactly the transition we have to make today. We are no longer defined by the worst things we have done or the worst things that have been done to us. We have to drop the labels.
We really do.
Whether you've spent your life carrying the label of an addict, an abuser, a liar, an anxious mess, or a victim, those labels are the dark dye. But by the grace of God, we are invited to become living testimonies.
We stop being the problem and we start being the proof of the solution. The rigorous process of recovery, the daily steps we take, the disciplines we commit to, that is our way of showing up at the tent of meeting today. It is our way of standing before our families and our communities and saying, look at what God has done. The old identity is dead. The new identity is sealed.
So I want to ask you, the person listening to this right now, what labels have you allowed to become your entire identity? Have you accepted the narrative that you will always be broken? Have you let the dark dye of a past mistake color the whole gallon of water in your mind?
It's so easy to do.
It is. But if you have, you need to know that God has offered you a new name. But obtaining that new name requires stepping into a process.
And that brings up the most practical question we can ask.
Yeah.
If Leviticus 14 was the 8-day physical process for restoration under the Old Covenant, what is the process for us today?
Right, because we aren't bringing birds and lambs to a priest.
Right. What are the daily, rigorous steps we take under Christ to maintain our freedom and establish this new identity?
To answer that, we have to look at exactly where Jesus was immediately before he healed this man. The Gospel of Matthew places this miracle chronologically in chapter 8, verse 1. It says, "When Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. And immediately the man approaches him." So the obvious question is, what was Jesus doing up on that mountainside?
He was delivering the Sermon on the Mount, which spans Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. And the very opening of that sermon is a block of teaching we call the Beatitudes.
The Beatitudes are the foundational principles of a transformed life. They're the new framework. If you want to know what the modern-day equivalent of the Leviticus 14 process looks like, it is the Beatitudes.
Absolutely.
These 8 principles are the exact steps of a recovery lifestyle. They are how we maintain the deliverance God grants us.
We shouldn't just look at them as a list of nice poetic sayings. We need to group them by how they actually function in our psychological and spiritual development.
Go true.
The first phase of this process is dealing with the internal void. Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted."
Being poor in spirit is the exact same posture as the man falling to his knees. It is the realization that you are spiritually bankrupt. You look at your life, you look at your struggles, and you admit, I cannot fix this on my own. My bank account is at 0.
Yeah.
It is the total surrender of pride. But the next step, mourning, is where it gets really difficult. When we hear mourning, we usually think of a funeral. But what does mourning look like in the context of personal transformation?
In this context, mourning is about facing the blast radius of your past. It is grieving the years you lost to your struggle. It is mourning the damage you caused to your children, to your spouse, to your friends.
The collateral damage.
Right. And it's also mourning the deep hurts that others inflicted upon you. A lot of people want to skip the step. They get clean, they experience a breakthrough, and they just want to move forward and be happy. But if you don't mourn the wreckage, you bury it. And buried pain always resurrects as destructive behavior.
You have to walk through the grief to get to the comfort. You have to sit outside the tent for 7 days and feel the discomfort.
You do. Once you do that, you enter the second phase of the process, which is redirection. Jesus says, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." Now, I have always struggled with the word meek, because in modern English, meek sounds like a doormat. It sounds weak.
It is actually the exact opposite of weakness. The Greek concept of meekness is power under control. It was a term used for wild stallions that had been broken and trained for war. The horse hasn't lost its strength or its fire. It has simply surrendered its will to the rider.
In our lives, meekness is surrendering our desperate need to control every outcome. It is taking our chaotic energy and submitting it to God's direction.
Which beautifully transitions into what we hunger and thirst for. When you are in the middle of a struggle, your appetite is entirely focused on the quick fix. You hunger for the chemical, you thirst for the toxic relationship, you crave the momentary numbing agent.
Yeah, you're just trying to self-medicate.
Exactly. You are constantly drinking salt water, hoping it will quench your thirst, but it only makes you sicker. The process of recovery is shifting that appetite. It is training your body and your soul to crave the pure water of righteousness. And Jesus promises that when your appetite shifts toward him, you will actually be satisfied.
And as that internal shift happens, you move into the third phase, which is outward action. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. And blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Extending mercy is incredibly gritty work.
It really is.
It is easy to be merciful when you are feeling good, but extending mercy to the person who abused you or the person who betrayed you, that requires supernatural strength.
It also requires extending mercy to yourself, which for a lot of people is the hardest hurdle of all.
Yeah.
You look at your own life and hate who you've become because of what you've done. You have to allow God's mercy to cover your own shame.
Yeah, you really do.
And that leads directly to being pure in heart. Purity in heart isn't just about moral perfection. It is about transparency. It connects right back to shaving off the hair in Leviticus. It means dropping the masks, having no hidden agendas, and being rigorously honest about your motives.
When you are transparent, when you are pure in heart, the promise is that you will see God working.
Yeah.
But this brings us to the final phase, and it is the one that catches people off guard: impact and resistance.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers," and then immediately follows it with, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness."
That is such a jarring transition. You do all this hard work, you surrender, you mourn, you show mercy, you make peace with the people you've harmed, and your reward is persecution. Why does stepping into a healthy identity provoke such resistance?
Because your new health disrupts other people's dysfunction.
Yeah, that's good.
When you drop your old labels, you change the dynamic of your relationships. People who were comfortable with you being the messy one or the addict suddenly don't know how to relate to you when you have boundaries. Some people will mock your new lifestyle. Some will try to pull you back into the old habits because your sobriety makes them feel convicted about their own choices.
That is profound. When you stop being the dark dye, the people who like the water tinted are going to get angry. But standing firm in that pushback proves that the transformation is real. When you combine the instantaneous, miraculous touch of Jesus with the daily, rigorous discipline of living out these Beatitudes, you become immovable.
Immovable, yes.
The power provides the deliverance, but these principles provide the stability.
But we have to acknowledge a stark reality here. You cannot do this alone. It is functionally impossible. Think back to the man with leprosy. He didn't perform the Leviticus 14 rituals by himself.
Right. He needed the priest.
He needed someone to examine him, to apply the blood, to apply the oil. He needed the community to witness his restoration. If you try to practice the Beatitudes in isolation, you will fail.
Isolation is the breeding ground for the disease. We need other people to help us mourn. We need people to practice mercy with. We need people to encourage us when we face that pushback and persecution. And this is exactly why local application is the absolute core of everything we are talking about today. You need a secure container to do this work.
For those of us here, that secure container is the weekly fellowship of Celebrate Recovery at Peters Creek Baptist Church, PCBC in South Park, Pennsylvania. We don't just talk about the Beatitudes theoretically. We structure our entire Friday night around providing a space for this exact process of restoration.
I want to walk you through how intentional this structure is. Because if you have never been, you might think it is just a support group where people sit in a circle and drink bad coffee in a basement.
It is entirely different.
It really is. The evening begins promptly at 6:30 p.m. with large group worship. But this isn't a standard church service. We combine corporate praise with direct biblical teaching focused on the recovery principles. And most importantly, we hear real testimonies.
Those testimonies are the modern equivalent of the man standing in the temple after his 8-day process. You are sitting in the room, maybe you are still covered in the shame of your label, and you watch someone stand up on stage and say, "I used to be entirely defined by this struggle, but look at what God has done."
Yeah, it changes everything.
It proves to you that the process works. It builds the faith required to take your own first step.
And then at 7:30 p.m., the magic really happens. The evening transitions into small groups. These are gender-specific, and they are governed by a set of rules that are incredibly strict. And they need to be strict to create safety.
The rules are absolute. First, there is zero crosstalk. That means when someone else is sharing their struggles, you do not interrupt them, you do not respond to them, and you do not try to relate to their story while they are speaking. Second, There is no unsolicited advice giving. We're not there to fix each other's problems. And third, there is absolute confidentiality. Who you see there and what is said there stays there.
I know people who hear those rules for the first time and they push back. Why so rigid? If I see someone hurting, shouldn't I give them advice? Shouldn't I help them?
It sounds counterintuitive, but advice giving is often a subtle form of control. When we try to fix someone else, we are usually trying to alleviate our own discomfort with their pain. By enforcing silence, by forbidding crosstalk, we create a psychological safety net that is incredibly rare in modern society.
It forces you to just listen. And for the person sharing, when they realize that nobody is going to judge them, nobody is going to try to fix them, and nobody is going to gossip about them, they finally feel safe enough to shave off the hair. They finally feel safe enough to be totally vulnerable. It mimics the set-apart time and space of Leviticus 14. It is a sanctuary dedicated strictly to the process of becoming clean.
And because that work is so heavy, we don't end the night there. At 8:30 p.m., we transition into the Crosstalk Cafe. This is a relaxed, vibrant environment designed specifically for healthy social integration. It is where you build relationships, connect with potential sponsors, and just practice being a normal human being in a safe place. You laugh, you share a meal, and you realize that your new identity includes joy.
So we want to look right at you, the person listening right now, and extend a direct invitation. If you are in the local South Park or Bethel Park area of Western Pennsylvania, we want you to join us this coming Friday night. Bring your heavy labels, bring your shame, bring the messes that you think disqualify you from grace, and step into a community that understands exactly how the process of restoration works.
And we recognize that many of you tuning into our conversation today are located far outside of Western Pennsylvania. The need for this safe container is universal. If you are outside our local reach, we want to equip you with the tool to find a safe, Bible-centered recovery fellowship near you. Simply visit crlocator.com and type in your zip code. It will connect you directly to a community that adheres to these exact same principles and strict safety guidelines.
For those who want to know more about our specific local fellowship, or if you have questions before you take the brave step of walking through the doors, you can reach out directly to our leadership team. Email Craig Amstone at craig.amstone@gmail.com. Or you can contact the church office directly at info@pcbc.church.
Please hear us on this. You do not have to let the dark dye continue to dictate the color of your life. Stop letting past failures, unhealed hurts, and devastating labels define who you are. Bring your entire life to the Savior. Fall on your knees just like the anonymous man in Mark chapter 1 and say, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Allow him to reach into the mess and touch you. And then commit yourself to the rigorous, beautiful, daily process of stepping into your new identity.
As we wrap up our time at the cafe today, I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on. We've talked extensively about man and we've talked about Jesus, but let's shift our perspective to the priests for just a moment.
Oh, this is so good. Think about those priests in the temple who received this man. They were the religious elite. They had spent their entire lives rigorously trained in the law. They had memorized every single tedious detail of Leviticus chapter 14. They knew the exact breed of birds required, the specific type of cedar wood, the precise way to shave the hair, the 7-day waiting period, and exactly how to apply the blood and the oil to the right ear, the right thumb, and the right big toe. It was all drilled into their heads.
They knew it backward and forward.
Right. But here is the staggering reality. Because true, complete healing of this severe skin disease was virtually unheard of, the vast majority of those priests had likely never performed this ceremony in their entire lives.
That's wild.
It was purely theoretical knowledge to them. It was a dusty textbook ritual.
So imagine the scene. It's a random Tuesday at the temple. The priests are going about their routine duties, and suddenly this man walks up. A man who used to be a walking corpse. He stands before them completely healed, skin like a newborn, and he says, I am ready to offer the sacrifices Moses commanded.
It must have sent absolute shockwaves through the temple complex.
Right. The priest had to scramble to gather the cedar wood and the scarlet yarn. They had to execute a ritual they had only ever read about. The man's healing didn't just restore his own life. His obedience to the process forced the religious leaders to encounter the living, breathing power of God in a way they never expected.
When you finally make the decision to step into the rigorous process of recovery, when you commit to living out the Beatitudes, and you show up in your local church or your community as a living, breathing testimony, you are doing far more than just securing your own freedom. How might your radical obedience profoundly shock and awaken the dormant faith of the very people who are supposed to be leading you?